Some housekeeping. If you have a question or comment, you can either enter it into the chat box or you can unmute and just go ahead and say it. I don't care if you interrupt, it's fine. This is your presentation, it's for you. Why we are here is the PARS vision mission statement, and that's on the screen now. In the event of emergency, such as an earthquake, fire, environmental, or human threat, this plan seeks to minimize human death, injuries, and property damage. And I just want to acknowledge and thank Reza and the staff, Sam, at PARS for taking the initiative to do this. I think this is very important. Both Jim and I are volunteers for the Office of Emergency Management for the City of San Jose. So this doesn't cost anything. We do this all over the city. And then we are also members of a CERT team in Japantown, which we'll talk about at the end. And Jim, anytime you want to jump in and add something, please don't hesitate.
Well, first off, this is the first time under the housekeeping stuff that we didn't have to tell everybody where the bathrooms were.
Very true.
Yeah, as Rich says, it's just for those of you who don't know what the acronym CERT means, it's Emergency Response Team. The ERT is the Emergency Response Team. They started out of Los Angeles, late 70s, early 80s, I believe, as a result mostly of the wildfires they had down there and earthquakes as secondary, and training civilians to being trained by firefighters to be able to react and save themselves and perhaps save others. You know, that's in a nutshell. You'll see what we're talking about as we go through the slides here.
Oh, I should probably point out something here. The logo in the upper left-hand corner is the Cadre logo. And I'm a member of the Collaborating Agencies Disaster Relief Effort, CADRE. This is a countywide organization made up of organizations like the Red Cross and Catholic Charities, Second Harvest Food Bank, and these are all nonprofits, that work or agree to work in the event of a regional disaster. So, PARS can be part of that. But I just wanted you to know that we do have a structure, an organization in place throughout the county to try to provide services and life-saving measures in the event of a disaster. So that's what those three blue swooshes are in the upper left-hand corner. Okay. You'll see the session objectives up there. I don't necessarily read all the slides. We want you to be able to care for yourselves. That's your personal preparedness and your professional preparedness at PARS. So we're going to be talking about that. To put it all in context, Cadre up in the upper left-hand corner has this model they use for community-wide preparedness. At the bottom level, the foundational level of the pyramid is personal preparedness, and we'll look at that a little bit closer in just a minute. And that's what this presentation addresses, is the personal foundational preparedness level.
I would say one thing, folks, don't let this slide intimidate you.
I know, yeah, it looks like a lot, but it's really pretty much common sense. The blue level is organizational preparedness. In this case, PARS. You have taken a step being not only a leader for your people, your community, but also the region around you. When we started working with Reza and Sam on this, we asked them to think about the neighborhood. You'll see what that looks like in just a little bit. And then the top level is how can PARS contribute to community preparedness for the county? You have contacts and outreach to the Iranian community, and we want everybody to be prepared, and that includes all of your constituents. So as you go through this, think about it, how it applies to you personally, if you would, how it applies to your organization, PARS, and then how you can take these lessons and share them with not only the Iranian community, but all the other people around you. And when we get that synergy, that collaborative effort and energy, that's when we start to create a community that's prepared. So we're focusing on tier 1. As you can see, it's personal preparedness, emergency coordination, emergency alert notification, procedures, resilient facilities, and hazard assessment. Again, I want to compliment Reza and Sam. We worked with your building owner there at PARS, and they did an assessment on your facility. When Jim and I first looked at your office building, you have 2 floors up above, and on the bottom level, it's the garage. And there's sections of wall holding up the 2 upper floors. That's very concerning to us. Jim calls that a soft structure. And during the Loma Prieta earthquake, we saw a lot of those types of buildings where the top portion of the building collapses or buckles or leans over onto the bottom part. Jim, you want to add anything more about that?
This is the soft story. Soft structure is actually phraseology that comes from building engineers, structural engineers. They're the ones who put this in. The first time we really heard about it was in the Loma Prieta earthquake, and we saw a lot of it in San Francisco, in the old Victorians, the ones that were built after we started having cars, and you had a garage on the first floor. Basically, a garage door is not strong enough to keep the building from going left to right. Also, if you were here then, the collapse of the Cypress structure, the highway that leads you up into Oakland, because it was 2 levels above ground. And basically, if you imagine if I was holding it up, if I was the concrete columns, and I buckled at the elbow, and the second story came down on the first, and the first came down on the road. A lot of people killed, some miraculously lived, but I can't remember the age of your building. I'm not sure if we actually got that data.
I think it was 1970, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and that is prior to what we know now. Basically, living in California is you're playing poker with Mother Nature, and Mother Nature never bluffs, and she will always win. You buildings built at a certain time are more likely to have a failure point. The newer buildings, of course, respond to the latest knowledge that the earthquake folks have. Oh, by the way, I'm a member of EERI, which is the Earthquake Engineering Research Institute, which is based in Berkeley. So the building was designed before we really understood what was happening in California, even though California has had earthquakes since people first walked around here. But they didn't really get the handle on it in terms of building buildings, especially taller buildings, as to how they have to work. So I was pretty adamant about you needed to get somebody to look at this building, and I haven't seen the results, and I'm sure that will be shared with us at some point here.
Yeah, actually, Reza just told me about it. Reza, go ahead. If you would let Jim know what your landlord and his consultant found out.
Yes, we has your idea, and what we thought maybe that would be a good time to get it done through the landlord. They had sent a person who has been taking care of this building, and also in construction area, which builds many other building around the Bay Area. And he is the one who takes care of the maintenance here as well, and spent time with us, looked around, and he thinks that it's okay. He was not from the city or from an organization outside of in the government, but that is what the report I received from him. Okay. That if you think we have to go further to get the government, a member of the city in that area of inspection, we can ask for that as well.
No, not at all. If you had a structural engineer come out and they are comfortable with it, then I'm comfortable with it. They know a lot more about this than I do. I know enough to be able to get through the basic levels of stuff. So if a professional with a license on this says it's okay, then you can breathe a sigh of relief. And quite frankly, and Rich, I think, will echo this next part. You don't want to get the city involved, quite frankly. City employees, for the most part, are trained to stay out of trouble. The easiest thing for a city employee to do is to say no, because they can't get into trouble for saying no. But if they say yes, then they own it. So, but the ones with who have licenses with the city are brought out, then yeah, they're going to want to cover their license and be professional. And it's not like they're trying to make money, but everybody is just watching their back. But I'm glad you brought somebody out. I appreciate that proactive approach, and I'm even happier that the engineer's happy. So
yes,
that's going to make the rest of this a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
What we talked about when we visited your facility was that it did survive the Loma Prieta earthquake. So that was the last major earthquake in this region, and your building held up fine. So that's a very good history that you can rely on. Okay, so our workshop guidelines, we would like you to create your own emergency preparedness plan. And I had Sam send out a template, which we'll take a look at. Please share your ideas. We welcome all comments and suggestions. And if there's, like Jim said, if there's something you don't understand, please don't hesitate to ask us. Again, this workshop is for you. We want you to be prepared and safe. Let's quickly review the types of disasters, earthquakes, fires. Has anybody experienced a public safety power shutoff during last summer when the wildfires were going? I'm glad. It affected mostly the upper east foothills down to Morgan Hill and across to the bottom tip of Almaden Valley. So kind of a big L-shaped area on both the one eastern side and the southern side of this valley. As you know, if there's fires near PG&E equipment, and we're talking trunk lines that feed major areas, PG&E has been shutting down that equipment to try to prevent the exacerbation of the wildfires. So they call it a public safety power shutoff. They give you a lot of notice, usually 2-3 days, maybe hours, and then all of a sudden you have no power. So for a lot of people, that could be considered a disaster. So that's why we include it as a disaster. We have had flooding in San Jose. We're actually currently, Japantown Prepared is looking at the flooding models for Japantown, and there is some potential risk there. We're seeing aside from the wildfires, we're seeing a lot more storms. And you folks have probably heard what's been going on with Texas. They had the polar vortex come down out of Canada, and it went down in a big U and froze the state of Texas. There were water pipes bursting and no electricity, and it's been like that for weeks. That would be a regional natural disaster. So when you think about your types of disasters, you want to identify anything that you think may fall on you. The last thing which prompted this workshop is crime. As Reza said, you had a guy who's a former associate come into the lobby area of your building and caused a disturbance. Now, luckily, he was separated from the interior offices, and he was basically forced to leave. But with the identity of your community, you could be susceptible to identity-based crimes or crimes of opportunity. And as part of your preparedness plan, you'll want to think about how to prepare and mitigate those. Okay, any questions on that? You'll notice that we're asking you to write a different plan for each disaster. They're all very different in the way that you prepare for them, the way that you respond to them, and how you recover for them. So you take a sheet of paper, it's got our matrix on it, you look at your people before, during, and after, your structure before, during, and after, and how would you prepare for an earthquake, a fire, a public safety power shutoff, or the bad weather or the crime. Why do we do this? Quite frankly, as Jim has alluded to, in a major regional disaster, we're not going to be able to get out there and help you. We're going to be overwhelmed. And why did it do that? This thing's got a mind of its own. You're not going to have access to water, power, sewer, natural gas, telephone communication. You may not have shelter, roads, overpasses may be collapsed, ATMs, not going to have access to money, gasoline, anything. Everything's driven by electricity nowadays. And all of these disasters affect electricity. So we're going to be busy. So we were hoping that you'll be prepared to sustain yourself for between 5 to 7 days.
Okay, folks, I have a pop quiz for you.
Okay.
How many professional ambulances do you think service the entire county, Santa Clara County? Just,
A guess.
150.
I'm sorry, how many?
150.
150. Okay, there's one number. Do I have any others?
Oh, yeah.
Think about the county of Santa Clara. It's what, 300 or 400 square miles. It's probably a couple million in population.
Rough guess.
300.
Okay, we've got 150. We've got 300. I feel like an auctioneer here today. All right, I don't want to take a lot of time in this. And as expected, most people who are not part of the system grossly overestimate here. There are less than 30. Yeah, good face. Yeah, good reaction. There are less than 30 for the entire county. And then the reason is, and not an excuse, the reason is, of course, the ambulance company is a private for-profit company traded on the New York Stock Exchange. So as the people driving the vehicles and stepping out of them and taking care of you and your loved ones, and the same with us and me, and I've been in the back of one of them, they're great people, but it is a corporation. So like most corporations, they do the most they can with the least resources and cost. So if that's all they have for the entire county, and San Jose is the biggest, well, I hope we get the lion's share. And that's hard to tell because they're running all day long. My nephew was on one of them for a number of years before he got hired as a firefighter full-time in another city. So the wait for the ambulance, if you call 911, could be a little bit longer than you think on a normal day. Imagine what it's like after a decent earthquake. Don't even think you're going to see one at all unless you happen to flag one down who doesn't already have a patient in it. Right? So rather than waste time, I will also say on the fire side, there are, let's see, we had 34, they've closed a couple of firehouses. So at this point, I think we have 32 fire stations opened in the city of San Jose. And all of them have at least one vehicle, one fire truck in them. About 10 of them have a second fire truck. So that means we've only got about 40 fire trucks that we can put on the street in the city alone, and the city's got 1 million people. So this is the motivation for you absorbing every bit of this to be as self-sufficient as you can. Because when the shaking stops, do not expect to see that big red fire truck. Do not expect to see the box, which is what we refer to the ambulances, unless you get flat out lucky. They will be going from call to call. The calls will be backing up. You may have trouble actually calling in 911 for a number of reasons. We'll talk about that a little bit later, which actually comes under the heading of utilities. So this is the kind of the fear of God part that I try to motivate people in. We live in a large country that's totally with it, and we're organized. And no, we're not. We have a long way to go. And when it comes to the demand on the systems of our society after a major earthquake, we are on our own.
Very good. Thanks, Jim. So let's talk a little bit about the process. This is probably the most important part of this presentation because I'm trying to give you the steps that you can use to create your own disaster preparedness plan, and you can carry this with you for the rest of your life. So you want to identify your threats, both home, work, school, shopping, wherever you go. You want to identify who the other people that you're going to be caring for, your family, your coworkers, people in your community. Make a plan for each step and basically know your options. Jim and I don't always agree on things. He has a lot more experience with this than I do, but I've actually used some of it, and you'll hear what our differences is, and differences are okay. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but if you know what your options are, if you happen to fall into a bad situation, you'll have like a menu of things that you can draw upon. You want to get your tools, supplies. You want to modify your facilities like Reza and Sam did with your building. You want to practice your response and then assess what went well and what needs improvement. And again, that process is contained in the bottom level of your preparedness triangle, the personal life safety. So any questions about any of that by anybody?
A corollary to this is everything we talk about here for you at work, you need to take home with you. And one of the reasons I was doing so much training in the tech buildings back in the 80s and 90s was the businesses kind of had to. There was a change in California law that took the onus off the towns and put it on the individual companies. But the thought was, because we spent a lot of the training, the class I taught was actually 40 hours. And some of it was preparing your family and your home. Aside from being best practiced as a human being, part of it from the corporation side was if you took what we taught you and you implemented it at home and you had all the awareness that we could give you, if the earthquake, a major earthquake hit at work and you weren't going to get home, and we'll talk more about not being able to move after a major earthquake, then you would know that the rest of your family who was at home or whether they were in school were in the best hands they could be also. Because if you didn't have that comfort, you would be useless as an employee trying to help in the response in your building right now. So the idea is that if you take all this and look at your house as a potential victim and your family as a potential victim of a potentially large earthquake and take the rudimentary steps, you'll feel more comfortable staying in your building, taking care of your coworkers and your clients. Because you may not get home anyway, because Mother Nature's not going to let you.
Very good. Thanks, Jim. So as part of your disaster planning, you want to think about your surrounding community. And Professor Foss from San Jose State's Anthropology Department defines it as SWOT, S-W-O-T. You want to think about the area's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So PARS is located on the Alameda right by Villa Street. There are a couple of things that are nearby you. The blue circle at Nagley and the Alameda is Planned Parenthood. It's actually a medical facility. So if you need medical help, that's probably your closest medical facility. Now, just across Nagley is the YMCA. They have lockers and pools and showers and, large gyms, other facilities, but that's also a large space that you can use. Over on the far right-hand side, you'll see the trains, Union Pacific, Southern Pacific. Unfortunately, that part of the track is a switching station. That's why there's so many tracks over there. They have oil tanker trains going through there. And if one of those things happens to derail, tip over, catch fire, it could create what's called a boiling liquid evaporating vapor explosion, or a BLEVE. It has the potential, one of those rail cars, to devastate everything within a square mile in all directions. And unfortunately, you folks are in that area. So as you think about your plan and you think about where you live, your homes, you want to think about what strengths do you have. We have a medical facility. What weaknesses? We have trains. We have opportunities such as the YMCA. There's also the Rose Garden Park over on to the west of that. I'm sure many of you have been over there. And then just above Taylor is the Bellarmine High School. That's also a very good facility for certain things, for evacuation. There's a big open field over there. It's a good place to plan your evacuations. And then, of course, what threats you have. The oil trains, the fact that it is on an earthquake fault, and it is in a flooding plain. I'm not sure if the gas line goes all the way down to the Alameda, but in Japantown, there's a 13-inch high-pressure PG&E natural gas line that runs right down the middle of Taylor, and it may come close to your facility. So if you are familiar with the San Bruno gas line explosion and fire, that's the type of line that goes underneath Taylor Street, just to the east of you. So if you know that, and it blows up, when you think about your evacuation routes, you want to think about going west, not east. Okay, any other questions or anything? For communications, during a regional disaster, you're probably not going to be able to communicate using landlines or cell phones. You may be able to use text messages because they use less bandwidth. You can post on social media if you can get access to a cell tower or an internet source. In Japantown, we have a family radio service, or FRS walkie-talkies. Those are the little walkie-talkies that you can buy at the sporting goods stores. I've got about 10 of those spread throughout Japantown. You can also use runners. So from PAR's location on the Alameda, does anybody know where the closest fire station is?
Before we get to that, Rich, I want to go over
Yeah.
the comps a little bit more.
Go ahead, John.
I'm trying to remember the year, but it's irrelevant. Probably sometimes the money's. Morgan Hill was the epicenter of a smaller earthquake. I don't know how many of you were here then for that. I actually happened to be teaching one of my classes over at the disk drive company in Sunnyvale the day of the earthquake. So that was kind of, well, weird at the best. My wife, before she retired, was the dispatcher for the fire department. That's kind of how we went. And when the shaking stopped after the Morgan Hill quake, the dispatchers are sitting there waiting for the phones to light up because they figure everybody's going to be calling 911. And the phones were strangely quiet. How can this be? The wires weren't knocked down. The earthquake wasn't that strong. But we are human beings and we have certain impulses and drives. And it seems to be really epidemic in the younger folks in this, but everybody was doing it that day, picking up the telephone because not as many people had cell phones back then, calling husband or wife or mom or grandmother or the babysitter. Hey, did you feel the earthquake? Well, when you lift your phone off the receiver, if you have a landline in your house or the ones in the office there, it puts just one little tick on the system. But there were so many people asking for the dial tone that it crashed the phone lines, not the physical lines, the electronic stuff.
Yeah.
It knocked out the phone service because everybody wanted to share what was going on. And I can't remember how long that took to get in place. As a result of everybody's human nature there, and down on Blossom Hill and closer down to where the Kaiser Hospital is, a couple blocks from there, there's a small strip mall. And a water heater snapped, fell over, snapped the gas line that it was feeding it, started fire, wound up burning 3 stores out. There was a pet shop, a music store, and an auto parts store, I think, but that's irrelevant to it. But nobody could call 911 because the phones weren't working. Somebody had to drive to the nearest firehouse that they remembered, which actually wasn't the nearest firehouse, knock on the door and go pointing at this large cloud of smoke. That's why they lost 3 of the occupancies in this little strip mall. Nobody was really hurt. Nobody died, luckily, thank God. But this is all just to motivate you to resist that impulse to pick up any kind of phone, landline or cell phone, because enough cell phones and you will crash that too. And nobody will have gotten what they want on that one. And they'll just keep trying to call, which just makes the problem worse.
Right.
Texting, though, if you have a cell phone, use the texting. It is a much minor load on the cell towers than voice transmission. Texting is okay, and Rich and I got this from a guy who made a presentation who knew a whole lot more than us. 7 or 8 years ago over UICon. I can't remember his name, but yeah. But that was always stuck in my mind. Texting's okay, talking's not.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Jim. So, any questions about this? So I ended with, do you know where your closest fire station is? Does anybody know?
Amboy Street?
Emory?
Emory or Amboy?
Yes, yes. It's just on the southern border of Bellarmine's school. So you can actually walk there from your office.
And what prize do you have for our winner, Rich?
My enduring appreciation. So very good. During the pandemic, we have to do things differently. It's starting to get better now. The case rates are down, the infection rates are down. Testing is also down, unfortunately. But they still encourage people to use masks and distancing, frequent cleaning, and screening in separate areas. So for our CERT team, we have to spread out more. We have to keep our incident command posts and our operations, logistics, planning, and intelligence branches separate. And then for triage, if we're triaging or assessing the injuries of people, we have to keep them at least 10 feet apart. So as PARS starts to develop its emergency plan, if something bad happens and you have to go through that rear fence out in that parking lot, the Google lot or whatever that is back there, you might consider taking the people who are ambulatory and putting them in one area, separate them by 10 feet, put the people who cannot move but are not life-threatening in one area, another 10 feet, put the people who are life-threatened and need immediate care in another area. Before we used to put them right next to each other, but now we're saying keep them 10 to 15 feet apart. And then each individual person needs to be separated also. So I talked about a matrix plan. This is what it looks like. Hopefully Sam sent that out to you. There's a left column, which is your people, and the right column is your facility or your building, either home or work. In preparation, you want to think about who you have to deal with. Who are your coworkers? Who are your family members? What are their needs? And kind of like we did the SWOT analysis for your area, you can do a SWOT analysis on your people. What strengths do they have? Do we have any medical people? Do we have any people with construction experience? Do we have people who have trained for disaster response? And if not, you might want to think about go ahead and having the people that you interact with get that training. And of course, the most basic one is a first aid class. In Japantown, we organize a first aid class every year in the springtime. And you can either send your people to the Red Cross, or you can have set up a class at your facility. That second floor room you have is big enough to host a first aid class in there. Okay. Identify the threats for the people, set up a family team, create responses, and include pandemic safety protocols. And hopefully that will go away at the end of the year. For the building, You want to think about securing hazards. So Jim and I walked through the building with Reza and Sam, and we identified tall bookcases or the flat screen TVs that weren't secured to the wall. And Sam said he was going to work on having that done. Sam, can you provide an update on that?
We're still working with this, but not yet. I'm still
Okay.
working with the contractor. Yes.
But they've identified what the needs are and they're working on it. So that's good.
Yeah, I have the plan. Yeah, I will work.
Excellent. So you want to think about storing water, food supplies, and we'll go over what Go Kit here in just a little bit. Tools such as flashlights, radios, batteries. You also want to think about how to open doors. In an earthquake, if the walls shift, it can actually pin a door inside the frame. If the wall shifts over, you won't be able to open the door. So as part of your plan, if any of you sleep in a room with the door closed, you want to think about maybe leaving the door open a little bit or an alternative way to get out of your bedroom, for example. Ideally, you want to be able to get out at least 2 or 3 sides. So on my house, my bedrooms are upstairs, and I'm very fortunate because I have a overhang that's like a covered porch, and I can open up a window, step out onto the roof of the first floor, and walk over to the fence and climb down. Same thing with my garage. It's one store only. So wherever you live, if you live in an apartment or a condominium or a house, if you're in a bedroom or a bathroom, you want to think about how to get out of that room. We talked about the seismic upgrade. Again, my kudos to both Reza and Sam for arranging the analysis of your building. And then as part of the pandemic response, you want to stockpile PPE, personal protective equipment, mask, gloves, sanitizer, hand wipes, stuff like that. So this is the preparation part. Any questions about preparation? And Jim, add anything?
A lot of the stuff obviously can get, I mean, even the hardware stores now sell first aid kits, and there are kits, but there are a number of companies online that have preparation bags of various sizes of what you want in them. 2 Christmases ago, I had to, I figured I'd talk about a walk the walk. So for Christmas, my wife, my 2 children, and their significant others all got backpack response bags for them to, for take care of each one of them alone. So you either have it at the door or you have it in your car if you were always near your car, either at home or at work. It's not hard to Google and find a bunch. I was trying to check on a company that I think is now out of business that is out off of Blossom Hill, and they used to have a lot of this stuff, but I don't think they're in business anymore.
Yeah, sorry, Jim.
You get it from
Rich, we prepared the package for everybody, and yeah, we already have it in the parts.
Excellent.
And we will distribute it this evening to all of them, and also for LA office too.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Class, yes.
Very good. Yeah, it's something you want to keep in your little office room. So we'll move to during a disaster. One thing we recommend, of course, is don't panic. And the best way to avoid panic is knowing what your options are, looking around and picking the one that works best for you at the time. Like for an earthquake, you never know where you're going to be. So you want to think about having several different plans of attack so that you can minimize your injuries. You want to expect aftershocks. And then when you can, check on the other people in your facility, either your home or in the office. For PARs, I recommend that everybody take ownership of their floor. If you're on the second floor, divide up your staff into take the floor, divide it up into sections, and say, you go check this section, I'll go check that section. I'm going to go in the kitchen, I'm going to go in the classrooms, I'm going to go in the large space, check the stairwells, do the whole floor. Same thing with the third floor. If you're up in the offices on the third floor, you want to get together with your staff and say, let's take a roster, see who's here. And then if anybody's not here, let's go see if we can find them. They might be in the restroom, they might be in the break room, they might be in a stairwell, they may be hiding under a desk, but we've got to check to make sure we identify everybody.
I assume there's not a standard sign-in sheet for all the employees who come in every day, but I guess there is a sign-in sheet for your clientele?
Yeah, for guests.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was on the counter.
So somebody needs to, of course, be in charge of that. And then when you get everybody outside, it's a matter of counting noses. Is everybody here? Where is so-and-so? Now, some of you may have gone out the back door and you're in the back parking lot. Some of you are out front. So the process is to agree on where everybody will get to eventually in hopefully short order so we can double check. A word about the aftershocks. It says exactly what it is. It is the shock after the earthquake, except when the next one that comes is bigger than the first one. And then that's the one that becomes the earthquake. And that one we first felt is a foreshock. It's just somebody knocking on the door. My daughter is the facilities administrator for a cloud company. So she's had all my training. Actually, they brought me in and trained their entire company team. She happened to be down in Santa Monica in a movie theater when an earthquake in the California desert in the south, closer to Nevada than it was to Los Angeles. And there was an earthquake a couple days before, and then another one hit. And much to everybody's surprise, including the folks from EERI that I mentioned earlier, the second one was the big one. The first one was just somebody going, excuse me, and the second one finally just pounded down the door. And my daughter in the movie theater felt that earthquake as far away as she was from it. And she was smart enough her and her boyfriend went, I guess we should leave. And so she texted me right away. We felt the earthquake down here. I said, you evacuate? She said, yeah. I said, self-evacuated? They closed it. She said, no, we self-evacuated. Most of the people stayed, but they weren't going to, So just because we get a good rocker doesn't mean it's the end of the story. I mean, the Loma Prieta, yeah, we had rocking all night long on that one, but they were aftershocks. They were smaller. But don't be surprised if those horse hooves aren't, that old saying, it's not a horse, it's a zebra. The aftershock may not be what you expect. It could be much bigger.
Yeah, and then looking over on the building side, you're going to have to decide if you're going to stay or evacuate. So if you have a major earthquake at PARS, one thing we recommend that you do is you inspect the interior and the exterior of the whole building. So you want to walk around the outside. You want to look at the walls, make sure there's no deformations, no warps. You want to look for cracks, and especially in that soft story around the garage. You can also, from the ground level, look up on the second and third stories. Are there any broken windows? Again, any cracks in the stucco? And then on the inside, once you get your staff together and they get assigned a section of the interior of the building, go through and look at the walls and the ceiling and the floor and make sure that there's no obvious cracks. You want to look, listen, and smell for gas, for water leaking, for sewer pipes, for sparking electricity, anything that's unusual in the building. And if you see that, then you want to issue an order to evacuate. And you want to go to one of your evacuation places. Like I said, I recommend it probably be in the rear parking lot. You go through the fence and there's another parking lot there. I think Sam said there's a gate in the back. So any questions about that? For your home, you want to do the same thing. You want to walk around the outside, look at the structural integrity of the walls, look at the roof, look at the windows, go around the inside. If you know where your utilities are, like for my natural gas, it enters my home at one corner. It comes in off the street. It's the closest corner to the street pipe. And then it goes up across the garage and into the center of my home. And it goes down to the water heater and the furnace and over to the gas dryer. So that's the only gas pipe I have, but I know exactly where it is. So when I'm walking around inside my home, I know what to look and listen for. If I hear or smell natural gas, that's evacuation time. That's also when you turn off the gas meter if the dials are spinning or if there's a fire. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. So for after, you want to think about through the whole process. You want to think about recovery. Your people may need medical care. Your coworkers, your family members, they expect them to experience some mental or emotional trauma. It's a very unsettling process, especially if you've never experienced an earthquake or a major fire or the bad air or a flood or a power safety public shutoff or a crime event. You want to set up a process where they're allowed to express their feelings, get it out, excuse me, and work through it. So, I don't know if PARS has emotional counseling. Reza or Sam, do you guys provide any counseling to your clients?
Well, we don't have on board any counseling, but we can refer to the area.
Okay, good.
For the
As long as you know that it's available.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with the building, you want to make sure that any repairs are done that are needed. And then going up that pyramid, you want to think about your neighbors. So you've got an office building to the left of you, and you've got an apartment building to the right of you. If you have the staffing, you might just go out, look to the apartment building, look to the office building. Do they need any help? Can you go offer them help? If you have a first aid person, you grab your first aid go kit, you can go over there and help them with their injuries. So
to encourage the behavior of talking this out, God, 30, 40 years ago, there was a major airplane crash in Southern California, south of LA. So of course, every agency that could be involved was involved. Of course, mostly police and fire, but a ton of other people, including Boy Scouts, on the periphery, not in the grim center of it. And about a year later, they noticed that the police in the police units that responded, a lot of them were taking early retirement. And it all happened to do with they weren't physically hurt, they were emotionally hurt by the carnage that they saw that day. So then everybody looked the other way and went, well, what about the firefighters? There wasn't the same surge to retire. So they looked at the difference in the two agencies. And it's not that one is smarter than the other, just we do things differently. In most places, police officers are in the car by themselves, unless they're training a new person. So they don't have anybody to really talk to. Of course, firefighters work in teams, 4 to 10 people, depending on how many trucks are in the same firehouse. And typically when the crew leaves whatever call it was, they go back to the firehouse. They may have been in the middle of the dinner and they'll sit down and as they're finishing dinner, they will be talking about what they just did, saw, and heard. We were informally, unknowingly sort of debriefing each other. So that became the norm then in our agency. I believe in police too have it now, incident stress debriefing. And if there's a certain thing happen in any incident, you will go to this. You have to go to this. Even if you're that tough old buzzard that doesn't need help from anybody, you're going to be in the room with the rest of us too.
Who are you calling a buzzard? So for Reza and Sam, if you have a major incident at PARS, you may want to think about holding a debriefing like Jim was talking about. Get your staff together, maybe bring in some food and some tea or something, and say, hey, how do you feel? What happened? What was your perspective on it? And I think you'll be surprised just how helpful that can be.
Good idea.
Okay. Anything else, Jim?
No, not for that.
Okay, thanks.
Except I did want to point out that the word panic was in capital letters, right?
Yes.
Years ago, the county, the state, in their emergency preparedness office, every year during whenever they focus on earthquakes, which used to be in April, now it's October, they find a tagline, and the one that's always stuck with me is, if panic was your response to the last earthquake, what are you planning for the next one?
Very true. Okay, so let's do a little quick exercise. If you have a piece of paper, just a blank piece of paper handy, pull that out. We're going to make a real quick plan for the public safety power shutoff. So if you split the paper in half, top to bottom, the left side is your people, and the right half is your building. So in the people under before the first row, please write the names of the people in your family. So this is primarily for your home. So if you have a significant other, if you have children, if you have grandparents or other relatives living with you or roommates, go ahead and write their names. And then if you do a SWOT analysis on them, do they have any skills that might be helpful for you? Have they had first aid and CPR training? Do they know about construction? Do they know about emergency response? Any skills that might be useful in a power safety shutoff? So again, this is for the public safety power shutoff. By the way, on the food, I mentioned I want to keep my refrigerator going because we don't want to have our food spoil. Recommend that if you are in an extended power safety power shutoff, that you eat your most perishable food first, which is your refrigerator food, your next perishable food next, which would be the food in your freezer as it's defrosting. And then the last thing, of course, are your non-perishable food, your canned goods, dry goods, the things that don't need electricity.
One last comment on the electricity.
Yes.
The formula amps times volts equals watts is all you need to know, and you can reverse engineer that to figure out what your demand is. Okay, if the refrigerator is, if it tells you on that little tag, you know, and if you know what the draw is on the mixer or something like that, and then you can figure out how much you can plug in and how much you have to unplug.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
No, this will come up later. Never mind. I'm jumping ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, because volts in this area it's a standard 110 volts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, if any of you live in a rural area, if you have a electric water pump to supply water to your home, and you lose electricity, not only are you not going to have power, you're not going to have water. We did a presentation for the San Martin, San Benito County area, and there were a lot of people on ranches out there. They're on well water. So they hadn't even thought about that. So depending on where you live, you want to make sure that you have access to clean water. Okay. So let's move to fire. That's one of the most common disasters that you see. You see fires on the news almost every night. And again, you want to think about your options. You can either fight it or flee from it, fight or flight. What we recommend is that if the fire is smaller than a garbage can size fire, you know, a regular waste basket, like say you drop something burning into a waste basket size container of paper and it starts to burn, you can probably put that out or move it to a place where it's not going to hurt anything. If it starts to catch the building or your curtains or cabinets on fire, then it's starting to engulf the rest of the building and you want to get out. We've seen videos of fires starting in, say, Christmas trees, for example, and it can ignite the whole room in a matter of under a minute. That's how fast it goes. So you want to think about what you're dealing with and then what could it possibly turn into. Anything else, Jim?
Well, let's see. For your home, you may or may not have an extinguisher. I certainly encourage you strongly to have one in your kitchen because that's the most likely place a fire is going to start. Yeah, exactly. I hope you get an extinguisher. Now, this is the easy peasy training slide right here. All you have to remember is the word PASS, which is an acronym for pull, which is there's a little ring pin that keeps you from squeezing the handle all the way down. So you pull the pin, you aim the extinguisher, squeeze the handle, and then sweep back and forth at the base of the flames, not out in the middle of the room, because you're wasting the extinguishing agent then. Depending on the size of the extinguisher will depend on how long it will last. So let's stay in the kitchen for a second here, and this isn't on the slide, but this is an important one. A lot of people, depending on what you're cooking, you start with oil in the pan. Kitchen fires are one of the most common ones we would respond to, and it's usually because an unattended pan that had oil in it that got to the flash point where it starts burning and not just heating. There's only one way to deal with that is the best. When you take out a pan or a pot that you're going to have hot oil in, get the lid for that pan or pot and have it sitting on the counter. So when you encounter flame in that pan or pot, all you have to do is put the lid on top. Because this slide here shows us fire is a triangle. It takes air, it takes heat, and it takes fuel. So if you put the fuel in the pan and the oil, you put the heat there, the air is all around us. So the easiest thing to do is put the lid on top of the pan and take away the air. You will smother the fire, and you don't make a big powdery mess of your kitchen either. Not that, it's just a cleanup issue. And that stuff is not toxic. So even if you wind up using it in the room and you get some of that and you inhale some of the powder, it's not really going to hurt you. But the kitchen fires are the ones that, and sometimes the kitchen fire turns into a whole house fire.
Mm-hmm.
But do not throw water on it. You're just going to make the fire angry, and spread it. Don't grab the pan, flaming in your hands, running to the door. Yeah, it sounds funny, but people have done it because they think they're saving the house. What they've done now is just burn their hands and maybe got their clothing on fire.
And their hair.
Yeah, all you need is the lid to the pan or pot you're using.
Or a cookie sheet.
Turn it off. Well, yeah, but if you have, hopefully you got that set you got for your wedding with all the pots and pans and the lids, right?
Yes.
Or more in my case, because I like kitchen stuff because full disclosure, recycle it to somebody else.
The other thing is when you think about prevention, you want to think about avoiding what they call the electrical octopus. That's too many plugs into too few sockets. You overload the capacity of the breaker, it causes heat. It can get hot enough to melt the insulation or wires and cause fires that way.
Now the picture does show that is, it looks like there is an on-off switch, and it might have a circuit breaker in it. Mm-hmm. But if you're using use the ones that are surge protector ones, which will, if it overloads, it will turn it off itself and then depower everything, all those little black and orange objects that you're sitting there. When the fire department comes out and inspects businesses, that's the kind of stuff we look for. The fire department can be pretty pushy when we come out to do fire safety inspections. And we get pushy because all the fire codes that you are affected by, positively or negatively, if you're the building owner that has to spend a lot of money to fix something, all the codes that we write are unfortunately built on dead bodies. Somebody dies because of something unusual. Oh, we don't have a rule for that. How do we cover that? Back in 90s? No. Wait for that. The MGM fire in Las Vegas, Nevada. Way too many people died because most of the building wasn't sprinklered, fire sprinklers.
Or items near heater vents, especially clothing or flimsy materials. Maintain your smoke and CO2 alarms, and know where your fire extinguishers are. Ideally, one on every floor.
Razor, how are we on time? Are we okay? Because I noticed we're just on slide 19.
We have another 10 minutes if that would help.
Okay. So now we move over to earthquakes. The standard response for an earthquake is drop, cover, and hold. If you're near a piece of furniture, a table, a sofa, a chair, you can drop either under it or next to it, cover up your head, turn your back to any glass, and hold on to the furniture because it may be bouncing all around. Okay. Don't run outside. During the Fukushima earthquake, there were people in Tokyo running out of glass buildings, and there's a waterfall of glass coming down the side of the building. You don't want to run out into a waterfall of shredded glass. In a building, this is where Jim and I disagree. He has a real good point, but if you happen to be in a doorway, if you have to brace yourself in the doorway, put your foot up so that it blocks the door. So during Loma Prieta, this actually happened to me. I was on my second floor landing. The earthquake hits, and I'm looking at 4 doors, 1 for the bathroom and 3 bedrooms. So I just grabbed the nearest door. I put my hands on the door jamb, and I put my foot up so that if the door swings, it's going to hit my foot. You don't want it crushing your fingers, which is what Jim's concerned about, and rightly so. But
this used to be a very common recommendation until there was, because there's a right way and a wrong way to put yourself in the door, and I didn't want to confuse everybody about this. Because you don't want to put your hands on the hinge side, because when the door swings at all, it's going to take a finger off. So
right.
put your back to the hinge side. You're still probably on a heavy commercial door, perhaps in your building. It could hit you in the shoulder and knock you into the hallway or into the room, whichever way is it going. Yeah. But your best bet, and the reason the doorway is so good is there's extra structural lumber or steel around the opening of the door to help hold the walls and the roof or the floors above you. So the openings that you see here, even though there's no doors, those are great because there is more structure hidden underneath that paint and sheetrock. That's a more stable area. But the door, and the commercial door, is quite heavy. You're going to get black and blue one way or the other. But trying to distill this, and you got to put your back against where the hinge is. You have to remember that. Otherwise, you're going to lose a finger or 2.
Yeah, don't want to do that. Yeah. If you're in bed, stay in bed, put the blanket over your head, or you can lay on the floor next to the bed. Don't run in the dark over unstable ground or broken glass or pottery. And if you look under this young lady's bed, there's a pair of shoes and a flashlight in a bag under her bed, and it's tied to the bedpost. Obviously, you don't want, during an earthquake, you don't want your shoes and your flashlight to bounce around into the middle of the bed so you can't reach it. You want to have it right near you.
Fun fact, the most common injury in a nighttime earthquake is cut feet.
Yes.
Because of this. You see the picture over the young lady's shoulder on the far wall. Pictures or mirrors falling down. They usually, mirrors are glass, but most picture frames have glass in the front. They bounce off their hook. They hit the floor. The glass breaks, and that's what causes it. And it's the most common nighttime injury, residential injury in earthquakes.
Yes. In a vehicle, slow down, move to the side of the road, and stop. You may feel like you have 4 flat tires, but if you see trees shaking and lampposts swaying and maybe buildings swaying and stuff, that's how you tell an earthquake as opposed to a flat tire. But stay in your vehicle. It is a good safety cushion for you. Outside, you want to think about some way to provide a structure for you to protect you. You can drop, cover, and hold next to an automobile or a mailbox. Any substantial structure. And of course, after an earthquake, check for injuries, damage, the gas leaks, and turn off leaking utilities. So these are the utilities at PARS. On the left is your gas meter. If you're standing looking at the building, this meter is right around the left-hand side or southern side of your building in the front. The valve is located on the pipe that's coming up out of the ground, and I've got a graphic showing what that looks like in just a minute. But you should have a wrench kind of similar to one of these so that you can turn it off. The electrical panels are in the break rooms on the second floor. And the third floor, if you have exposed wires or arcing wires, or you smell burning electricity, you want to think about turning off those breakers. And then your water supply pipe is also on the left-hand side of the building. That's the picture on the right. That valve is located in the garage on the left-hand side towards the back of the garage space. So if you have leaking water inside the building, you get a wrench to turn that off. And Sam's going to be getting those wrenches.
And that's all those wrenches are for. Don't work on your car. Don't do anything else. It's designed to only fit over the meter on-off knob.
Right.
And that's really important.
Right.
Now, one thing, when you're home or when you get home, don't turn off the gas unless you can smell it, you can hear it, you see the meter spinning, or there's a fire. Why? Because if it is a major earthquake, only the power company, PG&E, is going to come back to turn it back on, or should come back. You know, they will come back. It's a matter of when. Loma Prieta, I think people waited as long as 2 months before they got their gas turned back on, or
Right.
maybe their electricity. So if the earthquake happens in the wintertime, you're going to spend a cold couple of months. So turn it off for the right reasons, not just on impulse.
Yeah. As you walk through the inside of your house, you want to think about latches on your cabinets, especially if you have glassware in the cabinets. You don't want those doors flying open and the glassware crashing on the floor and breaking, and the cut feet that Jim was talking about. Shelf liner also helps prevent glasses from sliding out of the cabinets. Secure the top heavy furniture with these straps. And so these are nylon straps. There's a Velcro panel on it. It attaches to the top of the furniture. And then the eyelets are drilled into a stud in the wall. And you can tell there's a stud there. If you tap the wall, you'll hear the different sound that the wall makes. And the higher sound is where the stud is.
Yeah, the hollow sound is the area, the space in between.
Right. And then, of course, secure your pictures and mirrors. It's a little hard to see, but on the lower left picture, that's an earthquake picture hanger. So the wire goes into the slot, it drops down, and there's a little lip there so that the wire can't just fall off a nail.
A quick comment about, well, that's a china cabinet, and then the other one's a kitchen. But if I rotate you can probably see it, but there is 12 feet of IKEA bookshelves in my home office here. Now, if any of you put IKEA stuff together, some of it is solid, some of it is thin. The back of those things is really thin. You have to have something structural because those are attached to the building, but I had to create something myself. The back of those bookcases would pull right off the nail, or the screw.
So like on my IKEA bookcase, I put it on the top shelf.
Yeah, well, that's what I had to do.
Not the back.
Yeah.
Okay. If you live in an upper story, you want to think about ways that you can get out of the upper stories. Now, PARS has walls there's no windows, so you're going to have to basically rely on your stairwells front and back. In Japantown, we do have a building that bought one of those chain ladders. They're very difficult to use, and when they bought it, they found out that the hooks don't fit over the windowsills because it's a Victorian building and the windowsill is too wide for the hook. So they can use it. That's the Issei Memorial Building, Jim. They can use it on the railing for San Jose Taiko, but they can't use it on the windows.
Yeah.
So as you think about your home, how would you get out of your second or upper floors if you didn't have access to the stairwell? Okay, think about people with special needs. Do you have to have a buddy system? How could you get a disabled person or a person with what they call access and functional needs down a stairwell? You may have to carry them. You may have to set them on their seat and have them slide themselves down the stairs. But ideally, you want to practice that.
There is also a chair specifically designed to evacuate people from upper stories. It's called the evac chair. You can just Google evac chair and you'll find it. I was looking at them last night. They can carry up to 370 pounds. Man, it's designed, some are designed so that one person, it almost acts like a wheelbarrow going down the steps, but the person in the chair is fine. Some are modified so it's handles at both ends like a stretcher would have, but it takes multiple people to bring somebody safely down who cannot come down on their own using one of these type of chairs. The ones I saw online were about less than $300, just to put on your wish list.
Yeah. Okay.
So, one other thing: if the elevators are still okay, and you're trying to get somebody out, and I'm going to guess you don't have any wheelchairs in the building, but you're going to be wrong because every office chair you have is on wheels. So it's not a wheelchair, but it's a chair with wheels. Same thing, right? So if you have the ability to put them there without hurting them anymore, rolling them down the hall and knowing that the elevators will get you downstairs, that's a perfectly fine way to do it.
Okay, so we recommend that you consider a variety of different Go kits, one for your office, which Reza and Sam are providing for all of you. Thank you. One for your home and one for your car. We sent out a list of items that you may consider putting in them. One of the things you may consider is ID. You want to have your medical records, driver's license, phone numbers. You want to take photos of valuables. And you might consider storing like insurance papers and policies and things in the cloud. That way they're available to you if your building goes up in flames.
And not everybody looks like Brad Pitt.
Well, you do. I don't.
No.
This is some things you may consider for your emergency kit. So I've got an emergency kit here, and it's basically a soft-sided lunch bag. In the lunch bag, I have Cliff bars because my nephew works for Cliff. I've got 3 boxes of water, and each bottle represents 1 gallon of water per person. So for 3 days, you want to plan on having 1 gallon of water per person just for consumption, not for hygiene. Okay. In this kit, I have a first aid kit. And carbohydrates. This is really appetizing. I have a multi-tool knife, and it includes a saw. So if you live in an upper story building, you might consider getting either a knife with a saw or a sheetrock saw. If you have to, if your door is pinned in the frame, you can actually use this to cut through the sheetrock and exit a room by going between the studs. Now they're 16 inches on center, so you have to be able to fit through a 16-inch space. But using a saw like this, you can cut out a section of wall from the middle of the wall, which is 4 feet, down to just above the electrical outlets, which is at about 1.5 feet and 16 inches wide, and you can actually go out through the wall. Okay.
Back to food and water. If you do not have if you do not have water, don't eat the food. You just wind up dehydrating yourself quicker.
Yes.
We need water more than food.
The other thing that we recommend that you carry with you at all times is a whistle. If you're trapped in a building and you want to request help, 3 blasts on this every minute or so. Searchers will find you. You can only yell for so long. Eventually your voice gives out, but you can blow on this as long as you can exchange oxygen. So you might want to consider including a whistle in your emergency supply kit. You want to know where your evacuation drills are, places where you can meet up with everybody, have your list of medications, keep a tank of gas, and refresh supplies on a regular basis. So I change my water out once a year. I've got 3 5-gallon tanks in my garage. So for crime prevention, we recommend 4 E's as a strategy: education, engineering, enforcement, and empowerment. Education is knowing what crimes are prevalent in your area. In Japantown, we have a bunch of homeless people going through stealing things. That happens on almost a daily basis. So we have a community group. They're starting a neighborhood watch group. which goes to the empowerment part. We want to engage the neighbors. Excuse me, the enforcement is, of course, the use of the San Jose Police Department. I've also been asked to explore a volunteer community safety patrol for Japantown. That's not really appropriate for PAR's neighborhood, but what it means is that for all of your employees, as you come and go from your facility, you want to take a look around. Are there any cars in the parking lot or on the street in front that aren't supposed to be there? Are there people loitering around inside the garage? You want to note the description. If you don't feel safe with them there, don't get out of your car. Back out of the driveway, go across the street or down the block and call either into the office or call 911 and have the police come out and check them out. Same thing when you leave. As you walk out of the building, rather than just walk straight to your car, scan around, look in the spaces between the openings in the garage. If you hear or smell somebody, that's a warning sign. So you want to take appropriate evasive action. The engineering is the hardware or capital improvement part of it. Lock, sliding, landscaping, video cameras. Video cameras are very popular now, Ring and Nest, but they really don't do anything to deter crime. If you have one of those, you're going to be looking at videos of people coming up and stealing things off your porch. It doesn't stop them. They're still going to do it. It does allow us to get a video of the suspect so we can try to identify them and prosecute them, but it doesn't necessarily prevent them. Okay, so any questions about this? I know we're getting close to the end here. For a mass casualty incident or an active shooter, the protocol, if any of you have kids in the city of San Jose, they've gone through this training, is called run, hide, defend. If it's possible, run away from it, get away from it. And the schools have set up evacuation routes on all sides. If you can't escape, they recommend the kids hide, which means go into a locked room inside, hunker down, turn off the lights, turn off all sound, and hide down below the window line. And last resort is if they can't hide and the suspect is about to enter their space, they recommend defense, which everybody grabs a chair or a fire extinguisher or something they can use a weapon, and they attack in mass. It doesn't do any good to have one person attack an assailant. You've got to have everybody involved. So for PARs, if someone goes up into your lobby area on the second floor, it's causing a problem. You want to think about engaging everybody to come and deal with that person, even if they just stand back there and watch. Sometimes the mere presence of a bunch of people will deter somebody from acting poorly. We talked about checking the air around your facility. Monitor your clients. If you have a disgruntled person, either an employee or a client, if they post things on social media, you want to take those very seriously. I think you've done a good job of being able to barricade or lock your doors, windows, and practice active shooter drills, run, hide, defend, and then have tools and equipment. Okay, so any questions about this part of the presentation?
For the record, I hate having to do this part.
Okay, well, I hope none of that ever happens to you folks. Okay, there's again the summary of run, hide, defend. If you have children, you might want to sit down and go over, taking those lessons from school and applying it to your home. So we had a case just recently, it's down off Capitol Expressway, where a person broke into a home and they attacked a woman. And unfortunately, she didn't survive. She had no idea this was coming. She wasn't prepared, and he caught her off guard. But he kicked in the door, went in there, and attacked her. So again, for your families and for your employees, you want to be kind of in that mindset. Be alert and aware. I don't want you to be paranoid, but have a run, hide, defend backup plan. Okay, any questions about this slide? Okay, so next steps, prepare yourself for disaster, help your neighbors if possible. And then the last thing I'd like to tell you about is what Jim talked about in the beginning, which is becoming a community emergency response team member, CERT. The city of San Jose provides CERT training. It's a 20-hour course. At the end, you'll get a backpack with a helmet, a vest, a first aid kit, some basic tools, a flashlight. And during a disaster, the city of San Jose may ask you to come out and support a community safety event. So, for example, last week, the CERTs were asked to help distribute COVID vaccination information in lower served neighborhoods. So we sent about 30 people out into different neighborhoods throughout central San Jose with flyers in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese on how to get a vaccine. So it's basically the Plan My Vaccine website. Okay. So if you're interested in finding out about CERT, you can go to City of San Jose. It's the Office of Emergency Management, CERT. So we're wrapping up our presentation. In conclusion, you can't control disasters, but you can control how they affect you and how you respond to them. So know what to do, have your supplies, and practice your plan.
With this slide up, Rich, it reminds me of an earlier one, which we didn't, there was a data point there. Can you go back to the bridge one for a second?
Which one?
The bridge, the previous one, the Bay Bridge. The next to last. No, it's almost at the end. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, when I did that, it went back to the beginning.
To the beginning. Okay. Yeah. Keep going. You got to go all the way through it. My apologies, folks. This has to do with communication, and when we were talking about telephones and cell phones and texting and stuff like that. And hopefully, if the TV stations are up and the power's up and you have power, you get your news from the television. But if you're only getting your news from the radio, the day of the Loma Prieta, and people were saying the Bay Bridge has collapsed. The Bay Bridge did not collapse. One section failed as it was designed to. Each of those panels, you see the one panel that fell there, they're not bolted to the next one. They just sit on a ledge. And it was intentional because the energy of the earthquake, if it was really tied together, would have broken the whole bridge. So, when you're getting information from the radio, from television, make sure it makes sense to you too. And I'm not that kind of person that, oh, that's fake news. That's not what I mean. But people in the news business, they start talking, they get excited, and the phrase "the bridge collapsed" was used over and over again, which was not the truth. And then my last point is, we've already talked about the number of ambulances and the number of fire trucks. But and one of them is not that far away from you, and the next one is downtown on Market Street, Station 1. But when you see a fire truck running down the street, what we call Code 3, which is with the lights and siren going to an emergency, about 70% of the times you see that truck, it's going to a medical call. Going to a fire, as you would envision, is something that makes the 5 o'clock news, is less than 5% of the dispatches. Most of our work is medical calls, either from somebody who's been injured or is ill, or a car accident or something like that. And it's a nationwide statistic. Most fire engine rollouts are for assisting somebody with a medical problem.
Yeah, medical issues. Okay, well, that concludes our presentation. Any final questions?
You covered it so well, all the areas. I mean, Rich, it was a better presentation than what you did when the county invited you to provide that presentation. I mean, exclusive look.
Well, thank you. That's because of Jim.
I appreciate, and Jim as well. So this is so important in our life, to learn about these things, and not only for ourselves, for our coworkers, for member of family, for our neighbors, for our community as well, as we mentioned it. So I'm sure all my coworker benefit from this deeply, and it was an area which we learned a lot from you two guys. I thank you so much, Rich and Jim, on behalf of my coworker.
Online resources for you, ready.gov, the Red Cross, FEMA, the City of San Jose. If you do a search for a particular aspect of disaster preparedness, there's a lot of material.
The fourth bullet down, resilience.abag. ABAG is an acronym for
Association of Bay Area Governments.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out what there was. Yeah.
That's
Thank
the
you
hand,
again.
one of the handouts. So, all right. Well, thank you.